Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a really specialized and honestly super misunderstood role. It was born out of European data privacy laws, but make no mistake, it drastically impacts business operations literally all over the globe. We're talking, of course, about the Data Protection Officer. So, let's start with a quick gut check. Does your business actually need a data protection officer? Now, if you're sitting there mentally calculating your total headcount right now to figure out the answer, hold up, I need you to stop right there. Because that exact reflex, that leads us straight into the absolute biggest misconception about the DPO role today. All right, to clear things up, we've put together a really straightforward 5-part roadmap for this explainer. We're going to cover the DPO size myth, exactly who actually needs one, how to choose the perfect candidate, what their daily duties look like, and finally, the actual cost of non-compliance. Okay, let's jump right into part 1, the DPO's size myth. We're busting a major legal myth right out of the gate here. See, there's this really widespread, stubborn belief out there that once your company hits some magic number of employees, boom, you automatically trigger the need for a DPO. But you guys, that is a complete myth. The actual fact is, under the GDPR, the legal obligation hinges entirely on what your company actually does. It's all about your core processing activities. It literally doesn't matter if you have 10 employees or 10,000. Right, so what actually triggers the law then? Well, let's ditch the legalese for a second. Core processing activities simply means the data processing tasks that are strictly essential to achieving your company's goals. Basically, if processing people's personal data is fundamental to how you operate and make money, you're engaging in a core activity. It's the engine of your business. Which brings us nicely to part 2. Who actually needs a DPO? Let's treat this like an investigative checklist for your own organization. So, the GDPR sets up 3 very clear, non-negotiable triggers. First, you have to appoint a DPO if your core activities involve processing sensitive personal data on a large scale. Second, if your processing is particularly far-reaching for people's rights, meaning what you do deeply impacts individual privacy. And third, if your organization is a public body, you just automatically need one. If you hit even one of these criteria, no way around it. A DPO is an absolute legal requirement. Oh, but there is one pretty fascinating little carve-out within that public body rule. Courts that are actively acting in their judicial capacity, they are entirely exempt from having to appoint a DPO. Kind of interesting, right? Now, here's where you really need to pay attention, because national laws can actually override that European baseline we just talked about. The GDPR has this flexibility clause, meaning individual member states are totally free to enforce stricter requirements. A prime example here is Germany. Under Section 38 of their Federal Data Protection Act, they've implemented much stricter thresholds for companies operating there. So, the takeaway? Always check local laws, not just the overarching European regulation.
Now, you might be wondering, how on earth does this scale for massive corporate networks? Surprisingly, the law is pretty practical here. A whole group of undertakings can actually just appoint a single data protection officer, as long as that person is easily accessible to authorities, employees, and the public. And on the flip side, what if you don't hit any of those legal triggers at all? You can still appoint one voluntarily. In fact, authorities like the French SNIL highly recommend it just to ensure robust compliance and honestly to save yourself a massive bureaucratic headache down the line.
Moving on to part 3, choosing the perfect DPO and avoiding the conflict of interest trap. Finding the right person for this is definitely not your standard HR job posting. You're basically casting a highly specialized, independent referee, and you have 2 legal avenues to do this. You can designate an internal DPO, meaning you give the title to an existing employee, or you can go with an external DPO and hire an outside contractor. Both are perfectly valid under the law. But here is the absolute crucial point. Whether they're internal or external, your DPO needs some very specific traits. Expert knowledge in data protection law and IT security completely scale to how complex your data and company are. But here is the massive trap to avoid. They cannot have a conflict of interest. A DPO literally cannot supervise themselves. So appointing someone who is also working in your IT department, or HR, or who sits in senior management, totally off limits. It's like asking a student to grade their own final exam. All right, part 4, the DPO's daily duties. What does this internal referee actually do all day once they're hired? Well, we can trace their workflow across 3 main steps. Step 1, they are continuously working to ensure the company complies with all relevant data laws. It's an ongoing effort. Step 2, they monitor specific, really high-stakes internal processes, like data protection impact assessments. And they spend a lot of time training employees to raise overall awareness. And then step 3, they act as the company's bridge to the outside world, collaborating directly with supervisory authorities. And listen, a company absolutely cannot just hire a GPO, pat themselves on the back for being compliant, and then stash them away in some windowless basement office. The law explicitly demands that the company involve the DPO in all issues relating to personal data protection properly and in a timely manner. They have to be actively, promptly brought into all the relevant conversations. No sidelining allowed. And because they have to be this fiercely objective referee, the law strictly protects them from any kind of retaliation. An employee acting as a DPO must not be dismissed or penalized just for doing their job. They have to be able to monitor things without the fear of getting fired hanging over their head. On the administrative side, management must publicly post their contact data and officially communicate their appointment to the authorities. Oh, and a really vital note here: if you appoint a DPO voluntarily, they get these exact same rigorous legal protections. The shield applies across the board. Okay, finally, let's get into part 5, the cost of non-compliance. What are the actual stakes here? We've talked about all the rules, but the consequences of ignoring them are very real. The law is abundantly clear. Willful or even just negligent failure to appoint a DPO when you're legally obligated to is a direct infringement. And yes, it is subject to some hefty fines. Trying to plead ignorance about what your core processing activities actually are, that is not going to fly as a defense. Plain and simple, bureaucratic negligence is going to take a direct hit on your company's bottom line. Which brings us to our final and honestly probably the most critical takeaway of this whole explainer. Even with a DPO in place, with all their monitoring and all their expertise, the company itself remains ultimately responsible for complying with data protection laws. You can't just outsource your legal liability to this one person. So I want to leave you with a thought to really chew on regarding your own organization. Have you properly assessed your risk? Because if you haven't, it might just be time to get a much, much closer look at your core activities. Thanks for joining me on this one.